Blau und weiß sein Leben lang. Hallo meine Leute. Willkommen zum einzigen Schalke Podcast auf English. That's right, folks. Officially the world's only English Schalke podcast. This is episode 126 of SchalkeMerica, and I'm your host, Richard Kharman. Joining me on the show, as always, co-host Jack Mangan. Jack, how are we doing this evening, man?
Not too bad. Nice little break from the podcast, which, never a bad thing right after relegation becomes final. Glad to be back with you, though, and definitely a decent amount to talk about tonight.
We do, and it's been a bit like you mentioned. It's been a couple weeks. It's kind of almost felt like a little early summer break. We had the Hertha reschedule because of COVID and this and that, and so it ended up being like almost like 2 weeks now. So uncharacteristic for during the season, but we'll take it. Any little break here before the final stretch here. We know what happened this weekend, this Saturday in the game. So before we get too doom and gloom,
you celebrated Mother's Day by watching replays from the mother of all derbies, Schalke versus Dortmund.
I wish I should have, right? I don't want to get in trouble with the wife, so I didn't do that
Fair.
Before I went to bed. But before we get too doom and gloom, we've been trying to inject as much positivity as we could into the podcast. But who are we? We're just some lonely Schalke fans who do podcasts, right? So we enlisted the help of a friend of ours, someone you may know, to help us, give some positivity to the. Let me just play the video, right? Let me just shut up, all right?
Hello, everyone. It's Christian Fuchs, former Schalke player. It has been an awful, crazy season for everybody, player, fans, everybody around the club. As well, it has been a crazy season for Schalke. Definitely unexpected, definitely not the level that Schalke belongs to. I'm sure the team, the club, will do everything to get back into the Bundesliga where Schalke belongs, which is the standard for a Schalke team, for the club itself. Please support them. They deserve it to get back to the heights where they belong. And just to know, you're listening to SchalkeMerica. Glück auf.
Thank you, Christian. We gotta stay positive here as much as we can. We're ending the season hopefully on a good note, Jack. We thought we were gonna really get into this final stretch on a good note, but I guess it didn't quite turn out how we wanted, huh?
Well, for me at this point, what I would consider to be a good note is making use of some of our younger talent.
Yes.
And trying to whatever extent to prepare for next season, given that this season is officially not worth playing for anymore. So from that perspective, there's actually some things to talk about. But from a result standpoint, then, obviously it's another pretty horrendous defensive collapse after a somewhat promising start, which is a script that we've seen a number of times this season. So nothing new on that front.
I see some of the guests in the chat recognize our guest there. Yes, Christian Fuchs with the little nice video for us. You talked about some of the youngsters that we wanted to see, and we did see some of the ones in the lineup, in the starting lineup today, or on Saturday, I should say. Obviously, Timo Becker is a guy we always been seeing a lot this season. Florian Flick made his debut into the starting 11. Also on the bench, we also saw Brooklyn Kevin Eze, we saw Levent Mercan, who we've seen many times, Sean Pazuan, Matthew Hoppe, and also Jimmy Adrian Caparros. Thoughts on the youngsters not only being called up into the bench and maybe Florian Flick starting, but also some of these youngsters that got opportunity later in the game.
Yeah, Timo Becker, as always, somebody that we like seeing, and generally good account of himself that he puts out there. Florian Flick, that was the debut, and that was the one that I think I had the biggest impression taken away from, partially because he played an entire 90 minutes. Which I wasn't expecting, actually. And you can give me your thoughts on him in a minute, but I liked him a lot. I thought he was very positionally disciplined. I thought he had very good field awareness. You constantly saw him with shoulder checks wherever he was. And people always talk about when you make the jump from, like a second division team to a top flight team, everything gets faster. The speed of the game increases, those sort of things. One way to combat that as a young player is to try to do as much of your assessment of what's happening before you have to do that assessment. Yes. So, so many times you see actual experienced professionals on Schalke, ball watching, and what you're seeing him is as he's moving around, he's constantly throwing a shoulder check so that in case a pass comes to him, not only is he correctly positionally oriented, to receive that pass, but he also has some understanding of where people are before he has to look there, so that when he receives the ball, he has sort of a picture of the field, is able to make decisions a little bit quicker. I thought his passing was pretty good from all distances, short, medium, and long range pass. He played a couple nice diagonal balls that I noticed, and very much sort of a different profile of player to some of the guys that we've seen in a central midfield role, guys like, maybe Chan Bosduan, for instance, who's a little bit twitchier, a little bit faster, more willing to take somebody on the dribble, more willing to get forward, get wide a little bit. Flick was very much the base of that midfield three, and definitely more in sort of like a link-up role and kind of screening the back line. I didn't think he was, going forward as much for that sort of thing. So I thought he was promising. I liked him. I thought he was pretty composed. What were your overall thoughts from his debut?
Yeah, I mean, outside of the fifth goal, which no one looked good, right, where everyone just ball watching and Bebu ended up getting that goal. I thought, other than that, he was pretty good, pretty solid, like you said. It's for someone who's making his debut, it was solid. He was looking around, as you mentioned, good passes, good awareness, as you mentioned. I thought overall it was a positive debut for him. What a goal would have been nice, right? Sure, but for that we can't. A goal's been hard to come by this season in general for Schalke. So who am I going to say for a youngster to get it? But I thought overall it was a promising debut, and it's led me to be hopeful because we're seeing more and more youngsters, which we kind of hope we wanted to, because next season we believe it'll be many youngsters involved heavily throughout the season. So why not get them to start early and get them a little taste of some Bundesliga action now before?
Yeah, there was a point later in the second half where that midfield three was suddenly Bosduan, Flick, and Kaparos, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Three very young guys right there. And like we said, I mean, obviously you don't want to have an entire field, like a starting 11 of 19-year-old kids in the Bundesliga, because it's not going to be good for their confidence. But to whatever extent possible, work as many of these guys into the game like Gramatzis was doing in this one. I think that's a good call for the rest of the season.
Well, at least we'll have some savvy vets back in the defense, right? It'll be Tiao and Becker, right?
Well, I mean, that's what's interesting is, we kind of set up in a 5-3-2 against the ball, more of a 3-1-4-2 in possession.
Yep.
But that back three is Ochipka and Becker are two of those members of the back three. Those are generally the wing backs. Yeah, not the center backs. So, I mean, on the one hand, when you look at how many goals we conceded, and you're looking at a back three of Mustafi, which, good and bad from him in this game, but that's kind of what you always expect with him. And then two guys that aren't really even center backs to begin with. I think maybe we should have expected something more along the lines of this, given what our defensive performances typically look like. But it was. Sorry, go ahead. Continue down the path of wherever you were going to go before I went off on that tangent.
I don't know where I was going to go, but I was just going to talk about the goals, because after the first half, it was a much better performance than we've seen in a while for Schalke outside of win. Mark Uth got a goal in the 12th minute, nice play there where Serdar gave it to Schopp. Schopp made a nice move inside, fed it to Serdar again. He found an open Mark Uth who put it away nicely. One, I think, there early in the game, and then continue putting pressure against Hoffenheim. Put him on their back foot. Hoffenheim looked like the team we beat 4-0 earlier in the season. We ended the first half with Bastian Ochipka getting the corner into Mustafi for the goal. Nice goal off the corner post. It's see what happens when you have a person who can cross the ball as your crosser as opposed to Amin Harit. But I digress. So 2-0, going into halftime, and looked like, hey, maybe, I opened my big mouth and I said, hey, we should always play Hoffenheim. And then they woke up in the second half and turned into PSG, and they had 4 goals in a matter of 15 minutes. You had Kramaric with a great free kick, Okpaguma, who had a nice header. I mean, nothing Furman could have done about that. Baumgartner with a shot in the 60th minute, a header there, and then Bebu with that when they just tore us up in the 64th. So game, set, and match before the 65th minute. It was started out well, but it gave us false hopes because we kind of expected a 4-2 result, maybe 4-0, but having the 2 goals early, I think, kind of threw all of us off and gave us a little bit of hope we didn't need.
and here's the thing that just blows my mind, though, is like, Richard, you've been doing this a long time. You've watched enough of this Schalke team to know that you shouldn't go on Twitter at halftime and talk about what a great performance this is, because you're just inviting misery upon you like 20 minutes. I mean, normally 45 minutes later. In this particular case,
20 minutes.
It was 2-0 at halftime, and by the 65th minute, it was 4-2 or whatever it was. Absolute insanity. Going all the way back real quick to the first goal that you mentioned, the first goal that we scored. I actually did want to talk about this, though, because in my opinion, this was not a particularly good offensive move and was actually indicative of a lot of our issues in transition that you saw throughout this game and throughout the season, which there's multiple runners like Huntelaar generally often furious for not receiving the pass. But what you'll see is whoever's bringing the ball forward will wait until the strikers are like have eclipsed, the yard box and are kind of getting into a position where there's not a whole lot they can do before they decide to play a through ball in or whatever. Like these balls need to come in a lot earlier. And I'm gonna have to go back and watch that play, but I think I remember that being like Schupp kind of probably should have passed that earlier.
Yeah.
And it kind of made a pretty sloppy play. And then we got lucky because the center back literally slipped in the box as that was falling to Mark Uth, and he had no one defending him and was able to poke it home. So, I mean, good for Mark Uth. Happy to see him back, in the lineup, and good for him to get a goal after everything he's been through, injury-wise, and also, from maybe a criticism perspective at times. So, happy for him. But, I wasn't actually particularly pleased with that as an offensive move from us.
So that was an interesting play because I agree with you. The way it started out when Schroff cut on the inside, he should have fed it to Huntelaar or what was it, Harid or whoever the other runner was, and he didn't, and they had to wait at the line like you all said. And luckily, Serder was the last one to run to slow down, and he found Serder perfect time with it. And Serder was a heads up and found Mark Uth. But to your point, they should have found the strikers a lot earlier, and luckily the play worked out. But
or found Serder earlier because I just pulled it back up. And he's actually making a pretty incisive run that gets bypassed. He has to stop, turn around, and then he receives the ball when he's standing still, and is luckily able to play it back in. But that's what I mean. The momentum of some of these moves gets killed at times.
And I think luckily for that, the way that defender fell down is because that whoever that second runner was outside of maybe it was Huntelaar. Huntelaar's run, the defender was left in no man's land, and he didn't know which way to go, and he fell, and it fell right to Uth, who put it away. So I mean, it turned out well for us, but it wasn't the best executed attacking movement. When you're watching it live, oh, that was beautiful. But when you watch replay, you're there were some flaws, and it has been a repeat problem for us all throughout the season.
Yeah, the second goal you mentioned too. Yeah, when we went up 2-0 at halftime, it's a really nice header from Mustafi. It's a decent delivery in.
He looked surprised.
I mean, it was upper right 90. So maybe you don't expect it that accurate of a header all the time, but it's all connection. The thing you see from Mustafi is he's pretty good in the air, and he's also pretty good going to ground. He tends to go to ground, I think, with a greater frequency than we see a lot of center backs do, particularly in the box. And oftentimes he executes those pretty well. It's just the times where he gets caught napping or out of position, or just assumes somebody has a guy covered when he should be, checking that a little bit more. So frustrating. But I mean, not a first half that you watch and say, hey, we looked great, because we didn't, but took a couple chances and for the most part, reasonably competitive game at that point. And unfortunately, it just got out of control real quick on the backs of ridiculous free kick from Kramaric. The fourth goal they scored, I mean, people were out of position, but it's also just really well worked. A lot of quick passing, in and out. So it's tough performance overall, and you feel for those guys because at this point, the season doesn't mean anything, but any win that they can pick up is going to be a nice emotional boost. Any goal that they score, you can tell how excited they are for literally any goal that they get in there. And so for them to be at halftime with that kind of lead and then see it slip away that quickly, I mean, you can the frustration was visible from the players. They were furious out there. We stopped Huntelaar, the gang.
Dirk was saying Huntelaar played. He's like, Huntelaar was very quiet in this game. Many to be fair, many players after halftime were quiet. What I was going to say is now I just lost my train of thought when I looked at that comment. I wonder what was said at halftime, because was it something that the Hoffenheim manager said to really pump them up, saying, you can lose to a relegation team, or was it Schalke just celebrating, hey, we're going to win this game again? It's just the same like the first game where we won 4-0. Something happened dramatically at halftime. And granted, this was coming. We saw glimpses of this in the first half where Hoffenheim were getting closer and closer. Skolver, whatever his name was, for Hoffenheim came close many times with his free kicks, and Baumgartner as well. So, it was coming, and eventually we kept giving them too many free kick opportunities in front of the goal. I mean, what are you doing? They have some good free kick takers, including Kramaric. They finally paid off.
And that's what I mean is that, that 2-goal lead, I think at halftime wasn't indicative of the balance of the play that we saw in the first 45 minutes. Hoffenheim had chances. They had a goal disallowed for offside early on a play where I think that may have been a Mustafi error in terms of just not, Mustafi was in front of the runner, so that would have been behind it. But anyway, the halftime team talk. I mean, one thing that was a graphic that was shown on the broadcast, and that this actually got some play on Twitter too. I don't know how relevant this is, but I did think it was interesting to notice they showed the average positions of the players before and after Schalke scored. Yes, and so the second. I mean, I don't know exactly when that was taken, but compact significantly, and we started giving them so much width for them to attack into like wide in the final third. And, you know, so much of the first half, even though it wasn't particularly good, was marked by a lot of the field being taken up by players, Schalke getting forward and trying to put pressure, not letting them build that easily. And we just kind of backed off entirely. And, you know, I'm not saying that you have to take one strategy into a game, and just because that's what got you the lead means that's the way you win and that you never make adjustments. But, I mean, that seemed to be a little bit reactionary for a Schalke team that doesn't need to win this game anyway. You don't really have to protect. I mean, like, you might as well kind of keep doing what's working for you in that sense to some extent. So that was kind of frustrating to see. I don't know what the halftime team talk was, but there was definitely an adjustment, whether that was purely psychological on the part of the players or an actual instruction, but that seemed to kind of work against us, in my opinion.
Yeah, because I think to your point, you know, we're not trying to save any points and get in points. No, we're already eliminated. So just keep playing the way, you know, if anything else, you're testing out what you can do, what can work for the future, maybe future games this season or for next season, going and get some confidence to go in then. But I don't know, it wasn't good in what we saw in the second half, if that's what you want to call something. We saw it was just terrible overall, and 4 goals in a matter of 20 minutes in the second half, and really is put to bed after that, and no reason really to watch the game after that 4th goal. And I'm sitting there. I remember sitting there at halftime. My wife's like, "Your team's actually winning." I'm like, "Yeah." And then the first goal goes in, and I'm like, "Here we go." And then sure enough, every couple minutes, goal. I'm like, "Oh my goodness, what is going on here?" So 4-2.
Something else I wanted to mention briefly too. And tactically, this isn't, once again, it's not super important to talk about these things at this point in the season, but like, so much of our buildup continues to be down the sides, and like I understand that when your general shape is what it is. I mean, it's easy to kind of use that wing back as a pivot to kind of, you know, to get up there, but when you have players like Harit and Serdar who are sitting in the midfield and are as talented as they are at dribbling, at, you know, like the progressive dribbles and some of those things, you would think that you would do whatever you can to try to get them in a position to maybe advance the ball centrally a little bit more. And I think, like, you know, especially in the first half, when things are that spread out, you can shift the ball back centrally into a greater amount of space. And so often when we compact the way that we do, and we do turn the ball over, there's no spacing, and these guys are all bunched up on top of each other, and there's defenders in the mix, and it's so much harder for these guys to operate. And I think we as a team need to try to put more emphasis on getting these guys into space and letting them actually be the creative forces that they are. If the only time if they're just chasing the ball around defensively for 90 minutes and then like getting one touch like around the box, I mean, it's harder for these. I don't know. I just think, you know, Alessandro Schuff being 41% of your buildup in the first half, like, isn't maybe the best way to go for it. That's just me. But.
Yeah, no, and that's a good point. I think the best moments that we had in that first half was when we were playing quick passes, 1-2 touch passes, and going in the middle and spreading it out. And I think, you know, to your point, you know, like, use that middle space. If we play so wide, get it to Serdar. It wasn't the most beautiful first half. It just we got the goals, which is rare, which this year. So.
It'd be one thing too if these wide players that we're talking about are actually getting into the final third and playing in crosses. And this is yet another game where we have almost no crosses played. We're massively outperformed in that category. So if you're going to have all your build up to those areas only to have it ultimately be Kolasinac or Schupp like holding up the ball and then picking a pass to the center as opposed to like actually, you know, whipping something in from wide, I would prefer somebody else to be making those passes, to be trying to work that out. I don't know. The emphasis seems off to me, but I don't know what else we can really try to tweak or achieve at this point in the season anyway.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. So game ended 4-2, and we got a short turnaround because one of the games we missed was against Hertha, and so we're playing them this Wednesday. It'll be interesting because we missed the first time against them because they had several players who had COVID. I don't know if we may have had a couple as well. But news broke, I think today, Jack, that an unnamed player test positive for COVID, at least one player. So we'll wonder. I mean, we'll find out in the next 24 hours if any more players were impacted, and hopefully the game doesn't get delayed anymore, so that we have to prolong the season any longer.
I could be mistaken, but I think this is still an issue with the different regional requirements for certain things.
That could be.
And like there was one Schalke test, so it's like, who was he exposed to in the last couple of days, and is that going to throw the whole thing off again? So hopefully not more postponements, but I mean, I think all the Schalke players want to get these games like behind them on the calendar as quickly as possible. They don't want to just like keep postponing these. Let's just get it over with. But
no, I mean fans too. They're not the only ones. One thing that was on the calendar, Jack, was the election of the supervisory board. Many names, at least the fans, were hoping would probably get a seat. Uli Pazzo, he was instrumental in the rumors with the Ralf Rangnick. He had some ideas of himself of how to make this team more successful and just a better product overall. But unfortunately, he did not get a seat, Jack, and many people, I guess, controversies coming up. People had their thoughts about why he didn't get it. What were your thoughts on the whole supervisory selection and everything?
Yeah, and this is the area of Schalke that I'm the least comfortable talking about, just because I don't know as much as I probably should about the internal club structures and the politics and a lot of the figures on the ground over there, the candidates even in the first place. But I mean, Uli was somebody that had seemed to have a kind of a significant online presence in terms of his campaign and everything.
Hey, he follows you, doesn't he?
Yeah, he actually might. Somebody that was making some noise, at least in the Twitter sphere, about things, and I think there were some continuous supporter base that at least wanted him to be somebody that could be voted upon. And the problem is there's this the way it's being framed is there's this unaccountable election committee by Schalke that determines who the final 10 candidates for that position are that get voted on. So it's like, yes, the supporters, the members are still getting a choice, but they're getting a choice from like a pre-curated list that they can't vote on in the first place. And I mean, there's reasons why that is. I mean, I don't know how you tweak that to avoid that necessarily. I'm sure there's some solution we could come up with, but that's the way it is in the moment. So like, I think people are upset that there's somebody that had a vision for the club they resonate with, and they don't even get the opportunity to vote on him because he's not being allowed to get put forward. And there's different views on why that's taking place, but so that was interesting. I just thought that was kind of a big piece of news in terms of a lot of what was going on in terms of the Schalke conversation online and everything, people being upset with the short list of candidates there.
Yeah, for those of you who are listening in on the podcast or watching us here on YouTube, let us know your comments on Uli Pazzo not being selected for the final 10 for the supervisory board. I'd be interested in let us know on SchalkeMerica on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. Curious to hear what your thoughts are on that. Moving on to I guess a bit of good news. I don't know. I'm curious your thoughts on Matthias Schober, former player with Schalke, actually, was named the new sporting director of the Knabenschmiede. Many wondered if he was going to take over the role of Peter Knabel, but Knabel was going to keep his place, and he's going to work like as his assistant or in charge of the Knabenschmiede. He's done some good things with Mainz, if my memory serves correct. But what are your thoughts overall? I mean, obviously bringing in an internal guy, a guy who knows the club well, to help continue the growth of the youth. I believe he was a head of sport and development for the Knabenschmiede.
Yeah, I mean, so I thought Torsten Wieland actually had some interesting comments on this. When he basically said it seems as though we're moving towards a direction where there's no longer a single person accountable for like the entire sporting department, and that we're tending to delegate and specialize a little bit more, which is a more modern structure and potentially something we've been
lacking before.
Dragging our feet on in the past. So I mean, with Shorter coming over from Mainz and stuff and being responsible for the entire licensing department and certain people came in like I'm a squad planner, or I'm doing more of like the business side of things, and now it seems like we're really specializing and delegating and having a team approach to some of these things, which maybe would be helpful. So I mean, do you have any thoughts about that direction generally? I see the appeal of either of them, but I think that the trend is that like there's been these singular strong figures in the Schalke hierarchy responsible for those areas in the past, and they're trying to diversify a little bit.
Yeah, the word I'm hearing is that Schober does know what he's doing. He's done some really good things at Mainz. Many people have looked positively on his time at Mainz and what he's done over there. So it's looked as a good move, and like you mentioned, it's more towards the modern game and where there are the specialized people doing whatever. And ultimately, if that's what gets the job done, and we find people who are super good at what they do in their specific roles, then great. This is going to work out. And plus the fact that he is a guy who knows the club can only be good things. He was around the Knabenschmiede. He knows the team. He knows what it is to be a Schalke. And so to have him on the team, I think will be only a positive thing. Hopefully, I'm hoping. But you got to trust the process for now, and let's see what we can do here in the off season and going into next year, and see how the team, if they excel under this movement, and do we see further changes in the similar vein of this, right? More specialized people.
And I think that's potentially a good sign in terms of what Knabel's going to be doing. And I'm sure that may have been part of the conversation when he got the position in the first place. But the idea that he recognizes maybe areas in his own knowledge base or whatever that he needs help on, or that he thinks, it would be more efficient for the club if it was somebody else specializing on these specific things and him not trying to, be that main guy and do everything. So maybe that's positive in terms of, his direction and how he's trying to revamp us. Who knows? Time will tell on that front, but yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. Falco, we see you in the chat. We see your comment or question. We will get to it here in a second because it does relate to something else we're going to talk about. But first, Jack, contract news. First off, we did hear, during the 2-week break that there were some players who contracts would be null and void once the season ends because the relegation was official. Bastian Ochipka as well as Benjamin Stambouli were officially going to be released from their contract once the season ends. There were also, what we did hear also, at least what I saw, was that Ut, Harit, and Suat Serdar do have contracts that do allow them to play in the Zweite Bundesliga. Now, that is actually interesting to me because there was a lot of talk during the 2-week break that, Kanawa came out and said, whoever doesn't want to play for the team, if they feel like too threatened from what happened from the bus attack, they don't have to play for the team anymore. And the names that were rumored to be amongst them that are not going to play anymore for Schalke were going to be Ut, Serdar, and Harit. But they all started in the game, so we obviously that's a false rumor. So that's why you shouldn't really believe in rumors until it actually, we find out the truth. I'm going to believe that those 3 players in particular, if you're talking about those 3, yes, while they have contracts that allow them to play in the Zweite Bundesliga, I think a team that's in debt and, really we're looking to kind of rebuild our team through the youth, I think you're going to sell those players and try to get some money for them, Jack. I don't see any of those 3 players joining us in the Zweite Bundesliga. What about you?
Yeah, I don't either. Harit has to be one of the guys that you think we're going to try to cash in on. Serdar as well. When you talk outside of Weston McKennie and Ozan Kabak, it's always been Serdar and Harit that you think are potentially the most marketable. And would get us the best return. As far as Mark Ut goes, part of me thinks it would be interesting to see how he would fare in the Zweite Bundesliga, and part of me has a sneaky suspicion that he might actually be a fairly effective player for us at that level. But at the same time, it's just never happened.
Yep.
In for him at Schalke, and I understand that he didn't come in at maybe the ideal time in terms of what was going on at the club, and he certainly had any striker in our system is struggled, but it's just, does the prospect of Mark Ut continuing with the team excite anybody? Is anyone oh yeah, thank God he's sticking around? No offense to him. I'm just saying I wouldn't be surprised if he moved on.
Especially now if Katucci comes back, from loan.
But who knows what's going to go on with that, or Hoppy, or whoever. And
Katucci did come out recently and said he's excited to play in the Zweite Bundesliga next year and help Schalke get back to Bundesliga. So if there's that, at least we don't know how that'll work out.
And the thing I'll say real quick is, I do think it's the right decision from those players to continue playing for Schalke for the rest of the season. I think that's a good move, from PR perspective for them and for their,
and their sellability.
Yeah, exactly. That being said, I don't think I would have blamed any of them for choosing otherwise based on what happened, and the fact that the club offered that and they still elected to play, I think was nice to see, and a positive statement from them. So I was appreciative of that.
And 2 of them hooked up for the goal, right? One of the goals. So that's a good thing right there too. So Matt, I see your comment about Yuri Mulder. I thought I heard something too, but I didn't see anything definitive on my end.
Wasn't that he wants to join the supervisory board?
That might have been it. I think so. Also, there was another one. Who was the other person? Oh my goodness, there's one more former player. His names escape me. I'll get it by the end of the podcast. Either way, some other players who contracts expire. Yes, that's what it was.
Yeah.
That's what it was. Some other expiring contracts on the team: Alexander Schoff, Steven Skripski, and Nabil Bentaleb. And then some loans that we're going to be losing is Kilian Ludwig, Frederick Vinov, Kolasinac. That's up in the air, I guess. William, and then Paciencia. So, and then obviously Mustafi as well. But I doubt he's going to be staying after all that's happened.
Bentaleb's going to be the latest,
he'll stay. Lifer.
But that'd be funny if we just never got rid of him after everything.
Yeah.
He ends up being the most dedicated Schalke player the ball gets to go outside the stadium.
Oh my God.
Bentaleb is one of those guys that you would have guaranteed that we would be able to cash in on him a little bit, get something for him, and he's going to be the latest addition to the contract expired walking for free saga. Especially the comments you heard that said he is going to be gone in January, this winter.
And he's here.
And then it's not only is he not gone in January, he's actually getting reintegrated into the squad. briefly, and then we never saw him again after like the one cameo. I don't know. It just the whole thing. I mean,
yeah.
I think
he'll go to Bayern and become a star over there.
I think the SchalkeMerica podcast will view like Bentaleb the way like the Daily Show views like divisive political figures. Ultimately, it just gives us something to talk about like all the time, like regardless of if it's important or not.
Yeah,
we're gonna miss the content.
The lightning rod for us to keep us going. Yeah. I like it. So some other news since Falco did bring up Huntelaar, will he stay one more year? That is a good question because before the news broke this past break that we had, we thought, yeah, for sure, him and maybe Hoppy together, and they'd find a way to really tear up the Bundesliga. I think we got some really excellent news during the 2-week break, Jack. I don't know what your thoughts are, but Simona Terodde, a perennial 20-goal scorer in the Zweite Bundesliga, joins Schalke. What are your thoughts? What are your immediate thoughts when you first heard of this, and what are your thoughts now that it's been settled here now for the last week or two?
Yeah, I was kind of surprised to see some of the pushback or like some extent like the mixed reactions to this. Like, listen, I mean, to be fair, there's different angles to approach this from. If people are concerned about like a contract or whatever, like us spending money we don't have in the Zweite Bundesliga, whatever. But like, as I said on Twitter, like Terodde is Bundesliga 2 goal scoring.
Yeah.
He's the all-time Bundesliga 2 goal scorer, and that's not like all of that production was in the past. The guy has 23 goals, 5 assists this season at age 31. So like the production is still there.
And none of them are. I think very few of them are penalties. I think too. So I mean, like they're goals.
Yes, yeah, and it's just it was very just mystifying to not have everyone be like, yeah, this is a massive coup for us. Like, who else? I mean, if we're going to be signing players like from that division, because that's kind of like where our maybe recruiting is going to be at this point from like a financial perspective and all kinds of things. Who's at the top of your list ahead of that guy?
Yeah, no.
In terms of an offensive impact, I mean, like we're not scoring any goals this season, and now you're going to be like not be excited about a guy that has 23 this. I don't know. I don't understand it, but I do get the concern from the Huntelaar perspective of that's two very similar players from a profile standpoint. How would they work together? Do we need to move one of them on? Yeah.
Yeah, and then it was already on the thought that Huntelaar is going to retire at the end of this year. So would he stay on one more year just to get him back to back to the Bundesliga? That would be the question. Now it would be nice to have two guys that are similar. It's going to be hard about who gets the pitch time, right? But if you could figure out a way to have a plan A and B and two similar guys who can score goals, why not have no drop off of the striker and just build it, make sure everybody else around him continues to feed them? Maybe if Hoppy stays or Kutucu comes back or Bosdoin, whoever. Can feed them the ball. That's the important thing, I think. What we've seen with Terodde, wherever he's gone, he scored goals.
Huntelaar is not going to get the pitch time. I mean, if he stays in that situation, I mean, he's going to be the guy that's coming on later, that kind of a thing. Yeah, and you probably wouldn't play him together. But I'm not opposed if we can find it, if we can work it out from a financial standpoint. I wouldn't be opposed to Huntelaar sticking around, even if we do have Terodde. If that's what he wanted to do, I can't imagine he would. But if he cared, I wouldn't mind having him still, just for his knowledge base, the impact he can have on the team, and Yeah.
And I think the deal for Terodde is an extension should we make it back to the Bundesliga. So I guess he would get a last hurrah in the Bundesliga to try to do something good after failing at Cologne. So, I mean, I'm excited about it. I understand the whole dilemma about the contract situation, but we should be relieving a lot of that money with the sales this offseason. Hopefully, at least with the big contracts we can get rid of, so at least we can afford that much aspect. But like you mentioned, a lot of youngsters and a lot of Zweite Bundesliga players going to be coming in. And honestly, if there's any other player that has his caliber of goals but is younger, you're going to pay a lot more. And so, I mean, he's one of the leading goal scorers every year in Zweite Bundesliga for the last I don't know how many years.
And once again, he's a profile player that we haven't had a lot of recently.
Yeah,
I mean, like so many of the guys that we've signed have been, like the Twykerts of the world, the Skripskis, like the smaller, faster guy. I mean, like, and then every time we come up against like Fulkrug, we're like, God, wouldn't that be nice? You know what I mean? Yeah. And like Terodde is like kind of somewhat that kind of stylistic of a player. So, very much drop back, connect the pass, get to the center of the box, receive the service. Now we have to focus on acquiring players that can actually provide service, particularly from wide areas for Terodde, which is going to be important. And we don't have a lot of those guys on the team at the moment. So that's going to be one of our next focuses, I would imagine. Yeah,
we have to see what we got in Knappenschmiede, see what we have any fast wingers on there that we can incorporate into the team, including some of those youngsters that are currently getting their chance in the lineup. With Flick this past weekend, Boswell, I'd like to see more of him. Maybe Mercan get more opportunity. And I'm curious to see how they fill out the defense with, Ochipka going away, Mustafi more than likely, Stambouli. You have to believe that Sané is going to be one that's going to be sold. I don't see him coming to next year, even though he's played, with Hanover in the past and he's played in that Zweite Bundesliga level. You would imagine that, he's one of the players would be a hot commodity, especially if he is going to be healthy. That maybe the question is health, and maybe he has to prove himself one more year. To be determined, I guess, Jack.
Yeah, I hadn't considered that. That's interesting, the health component of it. But yeah, you would imagine he'd be somebody who'd be snapped up by some Bundesliga team. He's certainly good enough for that level. So yeah.
Absolutely. Short turnaround, like I said, game Wednesday, and then a game again against on the weekend against Frankfurt. So busy week ahead. The English Woche. Anything else you want to chat about tonight, Jack? Before we wrap this one up.
I'm sure I'm forgetting something because I feel like a lot happened over the last 2 weeks. But no, I think that pretty much covers it from now. So yeah.
I feel like there's something else that we missed, but hey, it is what it is. We'll be back next week, right? We want to give I would say, if you haven't done so yet, please sign up for the Schalke US newsletter. You get information not only on the club, get the latest on the Royal Blues, the local fan clubs across North America, and also hear some information about our podcast as well. Keep tuning in each week as we bring you the latest from the Royal Blues. We want to give a special shout out to Christian Fuchs for those nice words in our podcast today, and then also a shout out to Schalke as well. We got some giveaways we plan to give out. We want to giveaways, and there's me 2 weeks in a row with these beautiful words, Jack. We have some giveaways we're gonna hand out here in the closing weeks, end the season for us, at least on a good note. And so stay tuned for those giveaways, Jack. Where can our followers find you on social media?
Our followers can find me at JMMangan, JMMangan on Twitter.
I thought you were gonna say our followers can follow me.
Yeah, that'd be redundant a little bit. Our followers can unfollow me at JMMangan. I forgot. Yeah, Schalke sent some of the American supporters a nice gift. I was gonna unveil my Stein attachment for the Veltons tonight, and I forgot about that. But maybe next episode for sure. And then shout out close personal friend of the podcast, Christian Fuchs. Has the cameo watermark on all of his videos that he sends to his friends. No, but that was that. Pretty good pronunciation of the SchalkeMerica. That's tripped some people up because it is a strange word.
Nubel struggled with that, and Caligiuri did too.
Yeah. So shout out to Christian Fuchs. That's it. I'm good. Dude, I'm apparently eager to talk tonight because we had like 2 weeks off and now I'm just rambling constantly. This has been
now I want to end the podcast. Look at that. That's how it works. You can find me at r_KHARMAN. If you haven't done so yet, make sure you follow and subscribe to the YouTube page, and then obviously follow us everywhere on social media, SchalkeMerica. So until the next podcast comes, my friends, stay ready and we'll be with you soon. Glück auf.